Hello and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson, and a very warm welcome to episode 41, where we'll be talking about professional communication and culture for the UK. Now, this topic I decided to talk about today came about because I was running a series of workshops for Roehampton University for their postgrad students. They have a high number of international students who join them, and they felt that they needed more focus around the skills and approach to communicate well and professionally when they were interviewing, job searching, and developing their career here in the UK. They also felt that there was a cultural gap when really understanding how to connect with others, whether that was at the early stages with recruiters and hiring managers, or whether that was when they actually started their new role with their new team and manager. And this got me thinking that this particular topic, yes, I shared this originally for people who were early career or changing career direction. However, it is a topic which is hugely relevant for everyone, whatever your stage of career, but everyone at some point is looking for a new role. And these principles I'm sharing here today are particularly relevant for working in the UK, but there will be some potential principles here that will also apply if you're looking for international roles in large global companies, English-speaking companies. So that's why I wanted to share it here. So let's get straight to it. One of the first points that I shared was really about how much time is wasted at work due to communication issues. This is why I feel that communication is such an important area that we need to focus on. And the statistics are quite shocking. 68% say that they wasted time due to communication issues. And in fact, the research says this is getting worse over time. I also found a really shocking statistic that 86% say poor communication is the leading cause of workplace failure, which is absolutely huge. So as you can see, communication really matters. It matters for your work, for your performance, but it also absolutely matters for your career. And in my experience, communication is that differentiating factor between being seen as the high performer, the leadership potential, the high talent, and perhaps not quite making it. So communication matters. So let's start with some of the cultural principles for working well in the UK. Now, this is a huge topic in itself, and we also have to acknowledge that we're talking about generalizations here. It clearly will depend a little bit about which sector you're working in, what the organizational culture is as well, and really even sometimes the team culture. But let's talk about broad principles here today. So one of the first things that I talk about is that in the UK, having a focus on punctuality and meeting your deadlines is incredibly important. Now, this is all about relativity. So if you're from a culture that is already focused on punctuality and deadlines, that this might not be new news for you. But many people that I meet don't realize that real focus on making sure that you hit those deadlines. And if you don't think you're going to be able to hit the deadlines, really flagging early that this is the case. Also, sometimes people experience the culture, the team cultures here in the UK as quite flat structures, egalitarian, where even in your early days in your career, you're expected to express your opinion, share your views in front of senior managers. Now, for people who come from a more hierarchical culture, a high power distance culture, this might feel quite uncomfortable and might take some getting used to. But it is important to anticipate this, that even if you are the most junior person in the room, even if you have only just started in your role, you're still expected to have a view. And that relates to the next point, which is what is highly valued in professional culture in the UK is to express yourself clearly, simply, and concisely. This is very important, and there are, for some cultures, a more focus on an indirect communication style, which might mean talking more at length and explaining your ideas in detail. But this kind of debating style, or this kind of expressive style where you go into lots of detail to justify your views, isn't the usual way. And in fact, one of the skills I often work with people is, how do you get to the point? How do you remain clear and concise and able to land your messages simply? So that is a skill that is important for the UK. And then the final area I touched on, which I think is quite important, and is again to do with power distance and hierarchy, is flagging if you have an issue, or asking for support, or asking for help if you don't understand. It is much better, is seen as and anticipated as much better to do this in the UK, rather than to say everything is fine and to try and still hit your deadline and perhaps potentially not reach it. So asking for support is not seen as a weakness here, it's seen as a positive thing, and recognizing where you still need support and development. So these are just a few of the examples about the cultural principles for working in the UK. The other area that I touched on was around feedback. Now, feedback is a huge topic in itself. And in fact, I've just recently recorded an episode all about that. So I'll put a link in the show notes, which went into a lot of detail about the cultural values that influence how feedback is given and received. But if we think about the UK context for the moment, so in the UK, and again, this is a generalization, but particularly if there's negative feedback to be given, sometimes those messages are given in softer ways to avoid personal criticism and for people to feel like they are still valued and that they are still doing a good job. Now, I explain some of the techniques that are used and what they really mean, because this is important. You need to be able to understand how to interpret feedback when it is given to you. So some examples. The first technique is positive, then negative. And this sounds like great idea, but, or interesting, but. So we can hear on both of those examples, there was a but that came. And what it really means is you need to pay attention to what is said after the but. You need to pay attention to this part because this is the real part of the feedback. The first part is really about being nice, acknowledging perhaps the efforts that you've done. But sometimes if you're used to working in a more direct communication style, then you may misinterpret those messages. Similar to this technique is acknowledging. So we might hear things like, I see where you're coming from, but I hear what you're saying, but. So as you can see, this works in a very similar way. And the way to interpret this is that the real meaning, the real feedback is coming after the but. The other technique, which I think is a little bit confusing, is about asking a question, or almost it seems sometimes asking a permission to give feedback. Now, this is particularly confusing if it's coming from a senior manager or leader in the team, and you are used to working in a hierarchical way or in a high power distance way. So when somebody says, could I make a suggestion? Or what about, or how about we change things in this way? If it's particularly coming from a senior manager or from a leader, then you have to understand that this is not optional feedback. This is feedback that you actually should take on board and you should do something about. Even if it's expressed softly, it is still important feedback to react to do something with. The third topic that we covered, and I think is great to share here, is really about what does a professional email look like? Now, this is a bit of an evolving topic. And in fact, I know that many of you probably are already using AI tools and ChatGPT to write your emails. And yes, of course, it does a great job. But I would be a little bit cautious of over relying on these tools. And you always need to make sure that you are in control and you know what you're saying in your professional emails, particularly for those important emails like job applications, or when you've got to write an email to senior management or to the team, which really matters. So what are the approaches for writing professional emails in the UK? I've spoken earlier a little bit about being concise and to the point in your communication style, and that absolutely applies here as well in your emails. Brief, short emails are preferred to longer emails. However, if you are going to write a longer email, then really make sure that you are thinking about how to make it easy for the reader to read it, to get the key information. On average, apparently, each person receives 121 business emails a day. And whether you receive significantly more than that number or fewer than that number, of course, this is a high number. So really make it easy. Think about how you lay out the text. Use effective techniques like bold or underline or italics to really highlight the key information. Maybe you want to make sure there's white space so it's not all in one block. So really think about making your emails easy to read. However, if you do find yourself writing a very long email, I also want you to really challenge yourself and ask yourself, is email the right tool for this? Would I be better to arrange a meeting or to have a call with somebody to go through these points first? The other things to think about with your email approach is really think about how you build connection through that email. Now, I talk about the principle of small talk, and small talk even belongs in emails. So this comment that you make as you open up the email, like, how are you? Hope you're well. Hope you had a good weekend. And then the comment that you use to close the emails, look forward to hearing from you soon, or hope you have a really great afternoon. These little comments actually really matter. They're about building the small talk, building the connection and relationship with the other person. If you want to learn more about emails, then I've also done a podcast episode on that particular topic, and I'll put a link in the show notes. The final part of this, when it comes to emails, is really making sure that you check your emails. Now, I don't mean sort of checking all the spelling and the grammar. I'm pretty sure you know how to do that. And there are plenty of exciting tools out there like Grammarly and other tools that can help you with that. But pay attention to certain aspects. Like, for example, have you spelt the person's name correctly? It surprises me how often this can go wrong, and you might misspell the name or put a completely different name by mistake. I know myself that I've received emails addressed to Victor, which is the male version of my name. And of course, it's fine once, it's maybe a little bit funny. But if somebody keeps writing Victor, as once did happen, I then have to point out to them that they've got my name wrong. And that's obviously not making a great impression on the other person. Also, if you mention things like attachments, make sure those are there. There's nothing worse than having to send a second email to say, whoops, I forgot to send the attachment. Again, it just doesn't look that professional. And then my final tip around this about checking is when it really matters, when it's an important email like a job application, make sure you read it out loud or use voice technology on your docs to really hear the email that you're writing. It's so easy to miss the little words. The spell checks and the Grammarlies don't always pick up everything. So that's where you need to use your human touch, your eyes and your ears, to really make sure that you have written the email you think you've written. So there we go. As we come to the end of this episode, I need to acknowledge here that this is just a very brief overview to the idea of professional communication and culture in the UK. And of course, when I do this topic, it's very important to acknowledge that we talk about generalizations. And so if you are going to be job searching or starting a new role in the UK, you need to really also explore and feel, what is this organization like? What is the sector like? What is maybe different from general UK professional culture? No matter where you are in your career or where you're looking around the world for an international role, I can absolutely help you on that journey. If you're looking to elevate your communication skills for interviews, for completing your CV, for starting your new role and making sure that you make a fantastic impression and impact from the earliest days, then please do get in touch to learn more about how I can support you on your own career journey. And as we come to the end of this episode, I'm really, really excited to share these particular topics with you. And for me, it's wonderful to be able to share some of the things that I'm doing with other people outside the podcast. If you have found today's episode particularly valuable, then it would be great if you could share this with somebody else. Who else would find this helpful? Maybe somebody else who is job searching right now or looking for a job in the UK or in an international company. And maybe there are some insights here that could really help them land their next job. Also, please let me know if you found it valuable. It means a lot to me to hear your feedback, and it really excites me when I hear from somebody and they tell me what the impact of these episodes are. If you're feeling particularly generous today, then I would absolutely appreciate it if you could rate or review, leave a comment on your podcast platform about this podcast. For me, that would be the greatest compliment, because that would mean that I know that I'm doing a great job in fulfilling my mission, which is all about connecting people through the power of communication and cultural intelligence. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next time on Cultural Communication Confidence.